allegation, I'd go out and interview witnesses, gather evidence, gather documents, follow the paper trail, and then summarize all that evidence and present a report to my superiors, which would either recommend that the person be prosecuted or recommend that the investigation be discontinued because there was not enough evidence to sustain a prosecution. So I put that evidence together and I submitted it to my immediate superior, and I asked that it be submitted right up the chain to Commissioner Rosati. I realized that what I was doing was was going to rock the boat quite a bit, but I also knew that I had checked every one of these facts out and was over 100% certain of my findings. On February 8th of 1999 is actually the day that I submitted my report, and I asked that the commissioner or his designee commit in writing within 30 days to review my report. And I was only asking for a commitment. I didn't say I want all the answers in 30 days. Just commit to me. You'll look at it. I'm a federal law enforcement officer. I've sworn to support and defend the Constitution, and I really see some serious constitutional problems. With the federal income tax. So that was February 8th. February 11th, it went to my boss's boss. And from February 11th to February 17th, it went all the way to 1111 Constitution Avenue in Washington, D.C.
And that's Rosati's office.
That's where Rosati, his office is, as well as the Assistant Commissioner for Criminal Investigation. And I was told that my report not only went to Constitution Avenue, but at a minimum, the Assistant Commissioner for Criminal Investigation was aware of my report and the basics for what I was.
And believe me, your report went right to Alan Greenspan. Or a word of it, a briefing did.
Well, it turns out that on the, let's see.
Well, see, that's the one thing they guard at the upper levels is the great evil. And the one thing they cannot deal with, that they cannot stop credible people from within their system coming out against them. And now you're doing magazine interviews and radio interviews, and you've got the evidence, you've got your website up. Listen, what would you say, before we finish the story, what would you say to the other IRS agents and the other law enforcement out there about this? I mean, you've taken a real risk here in what you've done.
I'm taking an incredible risk, but I believe that the risk of doing nothing is even worse. What federal law enforcement officers need to realize, as well as every state and local officer, is that the laws that the IRS agents are enforcing, they shouldn't be enforcing. And I don't believe that they should be cooperated with. If somebody is being prosecuted for failing to file a tax return, and they have done the research and found that there is no requirement to file a tax return, then I feel it's morally and legally wrong, for that person to be pursued, investigated, and prosecuted.
Just don't know. They really think. Look at those kooks, those weirdos, those liars, until you investigate.
That's right, and I feel bad that I spent time thinking those things, but it was out of ignorance. And now that I've researched and found that a lot of those claims are actually true, my hope is that law enforcement people will start trusting the citizens more than they have, and the citizens, hopefully, when they see more law enforcement officers being honorable about these issues, will start to trust law enforcement again, and we can get back to a country where there's a lot of trust between the government and the governed, because it's only with the consent of the governed that the government exists. I mean, you basically said it right there. It is a pit, and you never get out. You pay interest. You pay the sweat of your brow barely pays the interest on the debt. It never goes away. It's like indentured servitude.
John, let me begin with you. You used to work for the IRS. What makes you say that most Americans don't have to pay income taxes?
Well, the sheer solidness of the evidence. I did about 2 years of investigation part-time while I was a special agent for the IRS, and really couldn't help but conclude that the evidence showed that most Americans weren't required to pay it, at least not according to the laws passed by Congress.
What is the evidence?
The evidence fills up dozens of binders and file drawers in my own home, but of course there's much more evidence than that. evidence about liability statutes, what form is actually required by Americans to file. When you actually look at the statutes and regulations rather than just the IRS pamphlets, you learn that the income tax doesn't have quite the application that the IRS would lead the American people to believe.
We have to maintain the confidence in the system because it's a voluntary system of payment of our taxes. Agreed. And so, voluntary system of payment of our taxes. Agreed. And so, because it's a voluntary system of payment of our taxes. Agreed. And so,
it seems pretty aggressive. Why do you think you've been able to get away with not paying or filing your income taxes for so long?
Well, first of all, I've not gotten away with anything. I'm not hiding from anyone. I'm simply asking the IRS to show me the laws that apparently require me to do these things, and they are suspiciously reticent to answer questions from me, and of course there are millions of other people, many other organizations who have attempted to get answers. In fact, the Congress may be aware that we were trying to have a hearing whereby Department of Justice and IRS officials would appear and answer questions, and they pulled out at the last minute. And so they act very suspiciously when asked to simply sit down at the table with the American people and discuss what their obligations are. Rather than pulling up a chair, they pull out a club.
it's a voluntary system of payment of our taxes. Agreed. A voluntary system of payment of our taxes. Agreed.
Review a bit in your testimony. You state that when agencies become aware of unauthorized destruction of federal records, that they are required to report the incidents to the archives. At any time in 2011, through last Monday, did the IRS report any loss of records related to Lois Lerner?
No.
Is it fair to say that the IRS broke the Federal Records Act?
They're required, any agency is required to notify us when they realize they have a problem that could be destruction or disposal, unauthorized disposal.
But they didn't do that.
That's right.
Did they break the law?
I'm not a lawyer.
But you administer the Federal Records Act.
I do.
If they didn't follow it, can we safely assume they broke the law?
They did not follow the law.
I felt an overwhelming need to understand why juries were finding innocent people guilty of not filing a tax return when there was no law requiring them to do so.
The system, because it's a voluntary system of payment of our taxes. Agreed. A voluntary system of payment of our taxes.
I went to talk to Marcy Brooks, a juror who used her common sense and did not allow the judge to railroad the jury into a guilty verdict.
He was being tried for 4 counts of not filing his income tax.
Okay.
And our question was, well, what is to decide? Either he did or he didn't. It never occurred to us that he might actually be innocent while at the same time not filing. In the federal government, it is not a felony not to file taxes. Finally, they said, okay, if we're going to get this guy, we're going to have to put it in the state. They called up the IRS agent, Agent Craner.
Craner? Yeah. Robert Craner? Mm-hmm. This is Ken Doherty. He's also an investigator with the Illinois Department of Revenue.
This is a request for a copy of the delegation of authority order.
Right, and I talked to my boss about that, and he said that my badge is that.
Badge is the authority. I thought it had to be
Asked him was, did you write any of this down? And Agent Craner looked right at him and right at us, and he said, I never wrote anything down. And yet when we saw the video, there he was, writing notes, you know. And so I'm thinking, okay, at this point, the judge is supposed to say, Agent Craner, it is clear that you have committed perjury. It wasn't even noticed. It finally came to the climax. Mr. Harrell looked right at the prosecutor and he said, I will tell you the same thing I have over and over again to government officials. You show me the law that requires me to file a tax return, and I'll be glad to do it. Tax return, and I'll be glad to do it.
And again, I ask, under what is the requirement that you claim under the required duty set? And the requirement under the regulations is what section? My question to you is, what particular act are we discussing here that I am liable to do these things that you claim I'm liable to do?
Your exact question would be again? Okay, what is the section that what? But I guess I'm still not understanding your question, Mr. Harrell.
Well, you must be familiar with what that you have the police powers to enforce.
Yes.
The prosecutor absolutely ignored him. And he started slandering Mr. Harrell. Just started attacking his character.
They're calling us tax cheats, they're calling us fanatics, they're calling us weirdos. I don't care what you call me, but I have one question. Where is the law? Show me the law.
They can't let this turn into a rational debate, because if they do, they lose it. So they have to insult people and say it's frivolous,
We felt like that there was an overall arrogance and that they were railroading Mr. Harrell and wanting us to participate. Judge Coogan, he looked right at us and he said, I will instruct the jury according to the law.
It's a voluntary system of payment of our taxes. Agreed. It's a voluntary system of payment of our taxes. Agreed.
We were sent to deliberation. The judge promised us that he would give us the law. And we looked, and it was not there. We wrote a note to the judge asking for a copy of the law. 10 minutes later, we get a note back. You have everything you need. But there was no law. And he had promised us. At that point, I felt betrayed. I felt like this man promised us the law, and that's what this whole thing is about, the law. We request it, and he still denies us the law.
And the reason they didn't do it was why?
Because there is no law. And he still denies us the law.
And the reason they didn't do it was why?
Because there is no law. Remember, we're talking about the Illinois state law here, okay, which is a law in Illinois. So we got out that law, and we read it several times, and I said, okay, wait, because they kept saying, but this is a law in Illinois. And I said, look at the beginning of it. It says, anyone required to file a federal income tax return. Okay, wait, because they kept saying, but this is a law in Illinois. And I said, look at the beginning of it. It says, anyone required to file a federal income tax return is required to file an Illinois tax return. I said, if it is true that he's not required to file a federal return, then that nullifies the Illinois law. Two people, they kept saying, but he's going to get by with it. And I said, what is he getting by with but his rights? If there is no law, he's not breaking a law. He's just standing on his rights. Are we going to deny him that? He's just standing on his rights. Are we going to deny him that? That's when this one juror sat back and kind of rolled his eyes and he said, you mean we don't have to pay taxes? We realized that this trial was much bigger, and the ramifications of this trial were going to be so broad if it actually got out. I mean, it's like we had just discovered this great government secret. And so when we came out for the delivering of the verdict, the judge was, I'm sure, even at this point, I'm sure he still thought we would give a guilty verdict. And the reason I say that is because of the look on his face when the first not guilty was read. His face just turned white. I mean, it's like, I don't believe this. The second time, you could hear people out in the audience, just in the courtroom, just going, wow, and the judge is just getting red in the face. I mean, he was just livid. And the judge got up and left. I sat there and I thought, this truly is a victory for the people. This truly is a victory for the people. And I have never felt more patriotic. And I knew that we had done the right thing. I looked at that man, Mr. Harrell, and I thought, the system might not work all the time, but this time, for that man, it did.
The fact that we have a voluntary system of paying our taxes. The fact that we have a voluntary system of paying our taxes. A voluntary system of payment of our taxes. Agreed.